Hello, Deborah and Cynthia.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, Judy.
Hello. I have the pleasure of having with me today Cynthia Meyer and Deborah Boyd, and they will be talking to us about an exciting new concept to me. Anyway, I think it's been around for a while, but it's called permaculture. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you. Us too.
So could you please, one of you, just give us a definition of exactly what permaculture is?
Permaculture is a whole systems design. That is, it attempts to include all systems that should be considered or could be considered within a certain paradigm of what you're undertaking. And generally, the garden gate is the doorway to permaculture, but it has social justice issues for sure. And that's reflected in the three ethics, which are people care, with fair share, and earth care. And the fair share is definitely social justice, as we see reflected right now with the COVID lack of disbursement of that resource.
Right, exactly. Right, thank you for that, Cynthia. Were you going to add something?
Well, just that the permaculture is a design for living. It really does encompass all aspects of life. The garden is the gateway into the conversation about permaculture because most of us are familiar with that and as it relates to earth care and people care and fair share. But it also applies to our home life, where we live, our dwellings, our buildings, our political views. Earth care, people care, fair share is sort of a moral and philosophical framework as well. Yeah, and that's why it's so empowering for me to, it just helps me to be more conscious of my decisions in all aspects of my life.
Okay, Deborah, thank you. Now, where did it start? And
crusty, opinionated earth lover, and his research led him to define the 3 ethics and 12 principles in a way that was simple and comprehensive and really accessible and usable.
Yes, as an anthropologist, he had a trained background in looking at cultures and how we came to be and where we're going. And this has been applied directly to permaculture.
okay, now I understand that there are 12 principles of permaculture. Do you want to talk about 1 or 2 of them? And I can actually list them on the video, all 12 of them. But if is there any 1 or 2 that you'd like to mention?
Sure. I really like the first permaculture principle, observe and interact. And it is the one that really reminds me that the decisions that I make really need to be in support of nature, as opposed to strictly in support of myself. It's just a very different way of looking at the garden, for example. You know, all my life I've planted, when I have planted, what is appealing to me, but that's not necessarily what nature needs. We use a lot of imported plants, for example, and nature in our area, we're part of a significant part of the Carolinian corridor. So when we look at what nature needs, it needs Ontario native plants that support our native pollinators, for example. And in that relationship, it turns into a reciprocal relationship where I give to nature and it just automatically gives back.
Mm-hmm. What a lovely way to look at it, the reciprocal nature of it. That's great.
Mm-hmm. A phrase that touches me reflecting that or illustrating that is that it teaches us or encourages us to have a healthy relationship with nature.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say then are the benefits of permaculture in addition to what you were just talking about?
Well, it's in some way a guardianship of the earth, and therefore is sequestering of water and our resources and the microbiome of our soil. All that is pays off to humankind as well, by securing our food supply throughout fertile ground. it also develops community, and community has been really startlingly beneficial to me in my experience of permaculture. It's really what I value the most, because it means that my resources, our resources, are tenfold, because it's not just up to me to have a pair of pruners, or manures from the farmer down the road. It's not down the road, but in the suburb. There's such a sharing, and also of co-education. So it's a situation encourages a maximum yield of the resources that we do have and that we can share with others.
Mhm. Very good. And I know the community aspect is good. I was talking to you both at 31 Ogilvy, which I'll speak to you about next. And well, I was there for 10 minutes, and about half a dozen people walked by, and you were offering them free tomatoes. So could you tell us about that property, please, and your free tomatoes?
Sure. We started the permaculture project in the front yard of 31 Ogilvy this past spring, and we pulled together a few members of the community permaculture lab and did a visioning exercise for the project. And we decided that we wanted to enliven a small front yard downtown Dundas, because there's high visibility there, lots of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, as you know. It's right across the street from the Amica building, where lots of residents of Amica don't get out as regularly as they might like to. And so we wanted to create a space that was supporting nature and supporting people in one small postage stamp size area. We wanted to make a statement that you don't have to have a field to produce a yield.
Yeah.
You can use whatever amount of space you have to practice permaculture principles.
And they do stand out, don't they? The permaculture gardens. And I know
Yes.
you had one also during the secret garden tour last Sunday, I believe it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
How did that go?
That was, to me, from my perspective, it was a resounding success. There were some people who came and just walked through very quickly, and that's fine, because it's a very different kind of presentation than the typical secret garden tour location. But there were a lot of people who stopped to engage and to talk about guilds and soil enrichment and harvesting and storing rainwater and all of these things, where they could see the permaculture principles actually take shape. An example of how we steward our land in a way that is consistent with permaculture. It's more than just words and language.
There's a quote that I like, which is this: it's a permaculture systems favor diversity over monoculture. Could one of you just explain that concept, if you would, please?
The idea of diversity is favored over monoculture is the fact that different plants will attract protective insects or microbes, and others will actually provide the fodder or the antagonist insects. We do need both. We don't want to completely wipe out the aggravants, and thus when we have a full bloom of or a full range of plants, we ensure that we have the feed and the protection that, and thus that this allows the growth of the plants itself that we're nurturing or that we're intending. Also, the diversity allows us to plant in such a way that the soil is covered, that we protect the microbiome of the soil that are so essential to the plants.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Now, I understand that there's a place, I think it's on Park Street, where you're talking about community earlier, that there's some neighbors that are side by side, and they are all cooperating or all working together on a permaculture garden. Is that correct?
Yes.
We've introduced the idea, it's not original, but the idea of supporting green blocks or green streets. And we started one, 31 Ogilvy was sort of the seed that inspired some of the other neighbors around 31 Ogilvy and behind on Kerr Street. to do some planting. And so we've had probably 5 different parties across Dundas express a similar interest in doing the same. And the question of monoculture is such a good one, Judy, just to circle back to that for a minute, because nature does not support monoculture. If we look at a natural meadow or a truly natural forest, the diversity in anything that is naturally, sort of naturally grows is all based on multi biodiversity. So that we say, we feed the soil feeds the pollinators, and it feeds us as well. And so we like a buffet, and so do the pollinators.
Yeah, it's nice when you see all the bees buzzing around, isn't it? You just,
Yeah,
that's the right.
It is. So we're very excited about this pollinating effect around this kind of idea of a green block, where we can work on larger areas. In Action 13, which is a local Ward 13 group of citizens concerned about climate, we've sort of adopted the phrase spare a square. And one of the permaculture principles is to start small. And so introducing these small starts over a wider area is really wonderful.
Yeah, spare a square. That's a good one. I like that. So what about lawns? Is there any place for a lawn in permaculture, or is that kind of a question that is a resounding no?
I would say it's pretty much a no, although the exception is woodland grasses, a combination of woodland grasses that grow long, don't need to be watered much at all because of their length. They are the seeds that have been collected by a company just north of Barrie. It's called the Wildflower Nursery. And those grasses grow like a luxuriant woman's luxuriant hair. They're just beautiful, but it's also still not optimal. Optimal, as Deborah explained, is the buffet of species of plants.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just does. Are there any disadvantages to permaculture that you could mention?
Yes, there are. Sometimes it's a challenge to find specific nursery native plants.
Sadly.
Yes, sadly. And the small, slow solutions will, it takes a lot of patience, and as Deborah reflected on the observe principle, that the best thing is to observe over seasons, but that takes time. And many of us, myself included, or maybe myself at the forefront, are just not that patient. We want to just get it in and try because the other one didn't work. But really, I had plants growing in my front garden, and we weren't sure in the spring what they were. And our master landscaper said, "Oh, I think you should just let them grow and see what they are." And my goodness, that was hard for me to do. But actually, I cheated. I pulled some out and I left some, and it turned out it was garlic mustard, which needed to come out. But it's just that it's that kind of patience, and also a kind of abiding trust in the flow of the world, or the flow of nature.
Yeah.
And the other thing I could say is sometimes neighbors who prefer manicured lawns may look out of the side of their eyes at our lawns, or front gardens, I should say. But generally, I personally haven't had much, if any, negative responses.
Oh, that's great.
And also this instant gratification that is so satisfying. If I could have that in every aspect of my life, I'm sure that I would be much happier.
Yeah.
And so when spring comes along and people are dying to get out and into the garden and they want something in bloom, that is, that's a real driving force in terms of inspiration and motivation for outdoor work. And permaculture, to build on Cynthia's comment, is not like that quite as much. There are things that bloom early, and we do work towards having something in bloom all year round so that there is food from the very early days of the warming season to the very end. And we do cold weather planting as well. So, yeah.
What would you say is typically something that's grown in a permaculture garden, and what would be examples of things that are typically not grown in a permaculture garden?
In a permaculture garden, we really look for plants that are multifunctional. So the more functions, so we establish criteria based on the vision for the garden. And then based on that criteria, we do research into plants and find out which plants serve as many purposes as possible in the garden. So there are some that are soil enrichers. In a guild, for example, in a permaculture guild, each plant is chosen specifically for the role that it plays in that guild. And the overall result is an interdependence, so that there are plants like false blue indigo, comfrey, yarrow, native yarrow, that actually are dynamic accumulators. They pull minerals from the soil and share them with the other plants. They produce nitrogen for the soil to share with the other plants. And that's just one example of what we really look for in permaculture. If a plant has one purpose, we might choose that depending on what someone likes, or, that's not completely out of the picture. I have to like it as well. But the overall multifunction purpose plants is what really makes the gilding process, the permaculture process specifically, unique and really wonderful.
Okay. And do you have a website that people could go online and check out a little bit more about that? Or do you not have a website?
If anyone watching this has technical experience that they would like to contribute to our movement, please feel free to reach out. We do have a Facebook page, the Community Permaculture Lab Hamilton, and there's a Google Calendar on the page where you can check for upcoming work bees. Mm-hmm. What's really wonderful about this particular group of people is that we don't just sit around a table and plan, we actually get out and work side by side together, and that's the best learning experience that I've had.
I would imagine it is. If someone wants to become involved by taking some action, they can contact one of you, I presume, and I'll put your contact information up afterwards.
Yes.
Yes.
I had that happen this morning. A young guy just finished the permaculture design course, and he wanted to come and learn how to prepare soil to plant fruit trees. And so we did that this morning, and it was really wonderful.
Fantastic.
So please join us.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do you have a lot of support? Like, do people are pretty receptive to what you're doing, I gather, from what you're saying on Tweedsmuir and Ogilvy. When people are passing by, they're generally interested in what you're doing, because it is different. It's not a conventional garden, a pretty garden where everything's just placed meticulously, and it's all about the design and the color, as opposed to how the plants can help each other.
Yeah, and on Winston Avenue, we have a lot of neighbors from afar who are walking to their synagogue, and so they're passing the garden, and that's when I get a lot of questions and a lot of discussions.
On Winston, yeah, they just across from the pasture, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Very good.
And at the Secret Garden Tour, there were about 50 people who expressed an interest and left their contact information. So we have to now figure out a way to engage them, hopefully in the garden, so that we can, help them figure out. Lots of people are interested, and they ask the question, just where do I start?
Exactly, right. Yeah.
And so we'd like to figure out the answer to that question. We have lots of ideas, and we're going to get together and talk about that, so that people have a very specific action plan about how and where they can start.
And what is the name of the group that you're involved in, or is there a name to it?
It's the Community Permaculture Lab.
Okay.
And the other group that we're overlapping with and doing a lot of partnering with is Action 13.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, good. Very good. And it keeps evolving as it does, so that's fantastic.
It does. We've got a planting bee coming up at St. Mark's Church on October the 2nd, where we're planting a 3-foot by 100-foot pollinator garden. So there'll be lots of activity there. There'll be some zero waste. People can bring their garden pots for recycling. We hope to have a tinker there to fix some tools in keeping with reuse and repair.
Yeah.
We're going to have a demonstration about how to set up seed beds for the fall from Ontario Native Seeds. We're going to have the opening of a seed library there. So lots of activities. That's from 9 until noon. And then on the afternoon of October the 2nd, we're going to be meeting on Kerr Street to talk about how to start a green block and how to get ready for planting in the spring if you're interested in starting a green block or green street.
2 things the same day then? You said is the morning of October the 2nd at St. Mark's Church, and then the afternoon is on Kerr Street?
Yes.
Okay.
I do want to add on the morning of October 2nd, people are invited to bring their black old pots, flower pots. So since they're not readily accepted for recycling, but we can bring them, I will bring them to Green Venture to be recycled.
Excellent. That's wonderful. That's good to know. So people can just show up on October the 2nd if they're interested.
Yes.
Yes.
And if they have plants they'd like to donate, if they're splitting plants, they can get in touch with me, Deborah Boyd 222 at gmail.com.
Okay. And that's St. Mark's Church in Dundas.
Yes.
And that's great information. I think I'd like to show up for that as well. It sounds like fun.
Great.
Hey!
Yay.
I knew
We'd love to have you there.
yeah, it'd be fun. That's coming up too, isn't it? October.
Yes.
2nd?
6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I'll have your contact information after this. And I really thank you both for appearing today. It was a pleasure to talk to you both and to learn more about permaculture.
Oh, thank you,
thanks.
Judy.
All right.
Thanks for your interest.
Yeah,
Yes.
very much so. All right. Thanks for your time again. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.